What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Halftime Snacks podcast. This show features short interviews that you can listen during the halftime of your favorite sports events. Every Tuesday, I host fun conversations with talented people in the sports industry where we'll learn from their stories, knowledge, and experiences. So go grab your favorite snack and come snack with us. Are you ready? Let's go! Coming up next on the Halftime Snacks is the man leading the disruption and innovation of the sponsorships market. He snacks with us today from Toronto, Canada, and he's here to discuss many topics with us related to sponsorship effectiveness, return on investment, and so much more. He's the CEO and co-founder at Sponsor Pulse, a first of its kind sponsorship intelligence tool that makes sponsorship insights accessible to properties, brands, and agencies of all sizes. The best part about this platform is that it can serve brands from several industries, from sports to music, entertainment, causes, and more. Sponsor Pulse will give you the data you need to understand the reach and potential impact of any property. I'm excited to get the chance to share the mic with him. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Adam Mitchell.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Man, for sure. Let's kick it off with a fun icebreaker, man. What is your favorite TV show of all times?
Favorite TV show of all time, I think, has to be The Newsroom. Really got me.
Oh, yeah?
Some of those episodes even got me tearing up, but
Okay.
big fan of The Newsroom, bringing in real life events. It was a good one. I still watch it to this day.
Man, I've never seen it. It's the first time I ever heard of it. So I must be doing something wrong because I don't know.
You'll have to give it a try. It's worth watching.
Is it on
sure.
Netflix, man? I've never seen it. Like, what's going on? Are you kidding me?
Honestly, I don't
this
even know. I don't even know where it is, but you definitely got to check it out. It's worth it.
All right, man. I'm gonna check it out. You guys check that out as well. Adam, man, happy to have you on the show finally. We're gonna be discussing so many things about Sponsor Pulse and about you and your story and your work and everything you've been doing for Sponsor Pulse since the beginning. But let's go and first understand, who are you? Okay, who's the one sharing the mic with us today? Who's Adam Mitchell? And to be more specific, let's talk about some experiences or some things from your past. If you want to mention conversations or people from your past that influenced you in a specific way that drove you to Sponsor Pulse and that also gave you an edge as the CEO and as the one, driving the company today and in the future. What are some experiences, conversations, people from the past that drove you to who you are today?
Yeah, no, it's a great a great question. I think, the start of my career, I started on the brand side. I worked over at Kraft Foods when it was still Kraft Foods, and worked then at Labatt. And I think I was surrounded by some of the best marketers I've ever met, some of the best people I've ever met. And a lot of them I'm still close with today. And sponsorship at that time was always a big part of our connection planning and how we wanted to get our brands into the hands, into the minds and hearts of consumers. And I think that was my first exposure, at least as a marketer, into, how we would go about doing that. I think working at Labatt on some of those major, global brands and local brands and all the different ways that we can integrate the product and the product story into different properties, whether that was sport, music, even on the causal side of things, were certainly foundational to one of the foundations to, where I've landed today. And then I went from there and joined property side and worked at the public broadcaster here in Canada, CBC, Radio Canada, and did partnership sales and marketing, where I was surrounded by an amazing team of people working on such a prestigious property with so much national pride. And I think that was another great experience, but seeing it from the other side and really looking at, how we could build partnerships that would allow brands to capitalize on the Olympic movement. And really those experiences led me to, I think, where we are today and working on bringing Sponsor Pulse to life. I think there's a lot of major pain points that exist in the sponsorship space and the sponsorship industry, which makes sense given all the growth that we're seeing there. And we're on the journey, and I think on the path to trying to alleviate some of those major pain points that exist, and creating a product that will hopefully evolve the way that the sponsorship industry works overall.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna get into all of those pain points in a second, but before that, I want to just make sure that the listeners understand what Sponsor Pulse is. So if you want to just give us a little bit of an overview of what the product really is, or the service, because I know that you guys offer specific types of services. So in a nutshell, if I was 5 years old, explain to me what Sponsor Pulse is.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So Sponsor Pulse is a SaaS platform. Not that a 5-year-old would know what a SaaS platform is, but it is a platform that provides brands, properties, and agencies, whether you're buying or selling or somewhere in the middle, with the insights that you need to make better decisions. So we're all about simplifying the decisions that you're making. If you're buying a property, if you're selling your property, we provide the data in a credible, transparent way that you can obviously leverage to your advantage to make that process more efficient, more informed, and to make sure that your dollars are working for you as hard as they possibly can, or that you're driving the most revenue possible for your property in the space.
Wow, man, this 5-year-old is now a genius.
A lot to ask for a 5-year-old to understand all of that, but
yeah. But first of all, let's define exactly what a property is, because it's not really an organization, but it's not really also an event, and it's not even also a team. So how would you define or explain, also again to a 5-year-old, a genius an Einstein 5-year-old, what a property really means?
Yeah, from our perspective, and I think it's a really important part of our business, is that across all passion points, there are organizations that you can sponsor, whether that's a sport league, team, tournament, whether it's a music show or an award show, whether it's an entertainment property, a community event, a charity, or a cause. And our goal through our product and everything that we do is to create a level playing field for all of those different types of properties. So we use the word property because it is, in a lot of ways synonymous with the sports world, but it really is a lot broader than that, because we capture and measure, thousands of properties around the world that certainly go well beyond the world of sport.
Are athletes considered properties as well?
So we do have a product that looks at celebrities and influencers and athletes, but they're not considered properties. I think for a lot of reasons. I mean, it wouldn't be right to call them properties for one, but no, we look at properties in terms of these organizations that execute and run different types of events, or offer, something to consumers, to people around the world to engage with.
Interesting. Okay, and so let's talk about the methodology.
Yeah.
I did some research, and I figured that what you guys do is you basically go out and interview like thousands of people, and you measure, you ask them about specific properties, as you mentioned, and then try to look for specific key points and metrics that you are looking to evaluate. So I have a lot of questions on that.
Yeah.
But if you want to just maybe also explain real quick how
do we
exactly do you go about finding all these people, and then creating those questionnaires or interviews, or how you go about quantifying the answers? Just speak a little bit about the process of doing that.
Yeah, that's a great foundational point. So, I mean, a lot of our journey started in essentially developing a questionnaire that would work across all the different passion points, all the different types of properties that we were just talking to, because a big thing that we talk about and that we hear so often in the world of sport in particular is we hear about fans and fandom. We believe in fans, we believe in fandom. There's no question about that. But when you're creating a common currency and you're leveling the playing field across music, entertainment, lifestyle, cause, fans isn't necessarily something that makes a ton of sense. And the reality too is that in just about every boardroom that we've ever been in any conversation that we've had, if we asked everybody around the table to define what a fan means or what it looks like to them, you're almost always going to get different answers. So we essentially set out to create a methodology, a questionnaire that would allow us to measure all these different properties along one common ruler, so that we can provide instant context to just how big or how great or how significant an opportunity is next to another. So we're in field every single month across 18 countries, surveying over 30,000 people. And those are different 30,000 people every single month, so that we're constantly replenishing and keeping a pulse on the industry and what's happening. What that allows us to do is to add new properties when new things are coming up, to add categories like cryptocurrency or cannabis or whatever it may be as those things are coming up. So we're super responsive and reactive to what's happening around us, which keeps us relevant and ensures that we have the latest and greatest data on how these properties are performing. So we're in field every month. We aggregate that data. The questionnaire is really obviously what guides the metrics and the key metrics that allow us to evaluate any property. We look at it threefold. There's a behavioral component. Do you have reach? Do you have an audience? How often are they engaging with you? Are you growing? An emotional component, which is, are you passionate or are you excited about the property? And then an impact component, which really gets down to the heart of it for brands is, are you likely to purchase or to be more favorable towards brands that are sponsoring these properties? And so we've tried to distill it down to 7 key metrics. We roll those up into an opportunity score, which is essentially a simplified way of, you want one number to compare different properties or opportunities, no problem. That's what you use. And of course, because of our methodology, we can get into so many different filters and consumer profiles to look at brand behaviors, category behaviors, demographics, going from global all the way down to local to see how that landscape changes, which is really quite interesting, and gives, I think, us a lot to work with and a lot to dig into.
So this is the moment where I start challenging you, Adam. Don't feel attacked. Okay, this is
please bring it. Let's go.
So my first worry with the procedure that you guys take, and I think it's a great procedure, great process of collecting information, but the first thing that I'm worried about is the reliability. How accurate are you delivering insights and numbers? These opportunity score, as you mentioned, how accurate it is. I'm gonna give you one of the arguments which I think you'll give me, and probably you'll tell me if it's right or wrong. But there's in statistics, there's just the law of large numbers, which means that the more people you interview, the more accurate your answers are going to be, regardless of the population size. So probably like 30,000. So if you're interviewing 30,001, it doesn't really make any difference at all. So probably like there's a number after X amount that it doesn't really matter how many more you interview, you already got your answers. So that's one. But what are your arguments in terms of like protecting the reliability and the accuracy of the data and the insights that you provide?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, we have a lot of different quality measures in place, and we have a partnership with Dynata, who's a globally recognized panel provider, to ensure that all the quotas are met and to ensure that we're bringing in, obviously, real people who are giving us real answers to their questions. So there's lots that we could get into, but that would be boring to talk about quality assurance and how we do it. I think the law of numbers is a really interesting point. So depending on the boardroom, depending who you're talking to, some brands say, they're happy with the sample size of 150 people, and they'll extrapolate that and they're fine with that. Margin of error, right? So it comes down to like willingness or business risk or what you're comfortable with. A lot of properties and brands will tell us that they want 500 sample as a minimum. A couple of the reasons why we survey more people than arguably we might need to, and why we do it consistently, are one, we want to get into the minutia. We want to get into the depth of the detail to tell you, as a brand, Budweiser, this is who you should be going after from a sponsorship perspective. You can't do that if you're looking at really small numbers. So we have the ability, through the size that we use and the number of people that we speak to on a monthly basis, to really get deep into specific cuts of data that allow, I think, brands and properties to get a lot more sophisticated with how they go about making their decisions when it comes to sponsorship. The second is things change. Things change a lot in the world of sponsorship. So you look at, I'll speak to an example here in Canada, but the Toronto Raptors, from a performance perspective over the last 3 years, like, we see those curves. So being able to trend that data and showcase how that's actually coming to life, and how it's their performance is actually translating to consumer behavior and attitude, I think is a really critical part of any property's journey, any brand's journey, to understand, are they making gains? So a big part of our product and the way that we go about collecting data is to ensure that we can continue to provide that storyline of, is what you're doing working? Or are you making gains with the groups of people that you're looking to make gains with? Is your property moving in the right direction or not? Which I think, to be honest, from a lot of what we see around the world in sponsorship, there's a huge lack of credible, transparent data. In a lot of cases, there are a lot of people that are making, multi-million, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of decisions that are doing so not necessarily with data or insight guiding them. So we believe that we are one source of data. We believe, obviously, in the power of leveraging other audience data, whether it be broadcast or social or digital, whatever it may be. But we're really focused on the consumer's perspective. We believe it's a great equalizer. Stated behavior, yes, some people will challenge in terms of, is what people tell you they do the same as what they do? Well, you could challenge people on the other side of it too. What people do online or what people search online or who they engage with doesn't necessarily mean that they're passionate or that they care about it or that they're likely to convert towards brands that sponsor that particular property or individual. So I think, we see it as the sum of its parts, and we're just really focused on doing the best we can to evolve the industry to be more accountable for the amount of money that's being spent, which I think will translate to greater value for consumers and people who are attending, these events or contributing to, the bottom line of a lot of these organizations.
I want to hear you from a different perspective. Let's say now you're a brand and I'm Sponsor Pulse, okay?
Yeah.
What would you think are the dangers of making choices or decisions based only on the data me as Sponsor Pulse provide to you? What would you say? What would you push back, or what would you say to me? Because here's what I'm thinking, okay? Keep that story in your mind. We're gonna get into that, but here's what I'm thinking, okay? I think that ranking is important, but I also think that ranking is not the same for different companies and brands worldwide. And here's an example just to see if it makes sense, because it's the quickest thing that I can think about. But suppose I'm an insurance company in Ecuador, right? That I serve clients in Ecuador, and I come to your website and I come to your service, and I see that the latest report on marketable properties, which we'll get into in a minute, says that the World Cup is the number one event property in the world, in the world of sports, which has the most impact and the higher opportunity score, right? But what if that doesn't mean that is the right place for me, or the right rank in terms of what I'm trying to achieve selling insurance in Ecuador? So suppose now you are the company selling insurance in Ecuador, Adam. I don't know if you speak Spanish, but we can do this in English.
Don't, unfortunately.
But what would you say are the dangers, or what would you push back in saying, okay, but explain to me why, or how exactly do brands and companies need to look at Sponsor Pulse, right? And how would you then advise against, being careful with what the opportunity score, what you guys at Sponsor Pulse say may drive wrong decisions for those companies and brands?
Yeah. So I think there's, my first challenge as a brand owner would be, it's a global list and I'm a local brand, or it's a global list, and what does that mean for my particular target or my particular category or my brand? And I think that's exactly the question that we want people to ask, because we have the data to help people get to that more nuanced decision. A global list, no matter how you slice it, is a global list. It's based off of the weighted population of the world and the way the data is coming back. So it's going to be, drastically influenced by where most of the population is and some of the properties that do, exceptionally well in those areas. You look at China, Indonesia, India, the US, they're going to make up the lion's share of it, which is the truth based on population and consumers. So it is a global list. It is intended to provide a snapshot of how properties are growing and who's coming onto the scene, who's cemented their role within the consumer's mind. on a global level. But I think the reality is that you've got to get into the nuanced data and get deeper into it to understand specifically, where are my insurance consumers, right? And what are the top properties in Ecuador in this particular example? And if I'm targeting, people that are a certain age bracket or a certain household income, we have all of those different layers of data that allow you to get a lot more targeted with the way that you look at your sponsorship portfolio, and that allow you to quantify, how big is this opportunity? Who are we talking about? How many people are there that meet those criteria in the particular market that you're active in?
Interesting.
I think I ended up pitching Sponsor Pulse there instead of answering as a brand, but I think that it was a follow-up question that was coming, so I just beat you to it.
Yeah, no, but I think it makes total sense. Now, one of the things that I've realized from interviewing tons of founders and CEOs and directors of sports companies is that the better the question that you make, the better the answer that you're gonna get probably in the interview. Now, I want to know, how exactly have you iterated over your questions in the questionnaire? Like, how important it is for you guys to go back to the questionnaire and see what questions are driving better answers, and then how to triple tap on those, or either change other of your questions. Like, just walk me through the iteration of improving the product through improving the source, the main source of inputs that drive your outputs.
Yeah, no, it's a really important point. I mean, our parent company, IMI International, is a global marketing research consultancy that's been around for it's been around for 50 years. So, our parent company really got started in the sponsorship space over the last 10, 15 years. And then obviously 3 years ago, we decided to start on this path of creating Sponsor Pulse. And I think, we leveraged the history, the knowledge, the experience from all the different surveys, questionnaires, effectiveness studies that we had done previously for brands across the globe, properties across the globe. But then there were some underlying key themes that we knew we needed this methodology to evolve to deliver against, in terms of that level playing field for all different property types. And we knew that there were certain elements that we wanted to get a better assessment of. So a lot of what we did in the initial early days, and it's not glamorous or sexy, but we were back into field on a weekly basis, surveying thousands of people in different markets to see, are we getting differences in the responses? Or are we getting consistency in the responses? Or what are the deltas that exist between the different questions that we're asking? So I think, we spent not only a ton of time historically as a company, but certainly in the early days and the early phases to ensure that we were providing a narrative that made sense for both properties and for brands. And I think, and for agencies, obviously, who are kind of in the middle or representing one side. Like, we wanted to be very purposeful with the metrics that we asked. So we wanted to be able to provide a total reach number that isn't just about how many people follow you socially, because that's not reach. And it's not just about broadcast. So we've layered in different metrics or different ways of qualifying whether people engage with the property, that go into, following it in news, or buying or wearing merchandise, or playing fantasy when it comes to sports, or volunteering your time or donating money when it comes to causes. So we've been very, I think, intentional with the way that we've looked at the different metrics that make up the composition of our story, to say, we can tell you what the total reach and audience is, and we can break that out in terms of how and who you're reaching where. We can then get deeper into who's actually engaging on a frequent basis, intensely on a weekly basis or more with you, which is so important for properties to obviously move the needle on, but also for brands who are looking for properties that are going to offer them a lot of different opportunities to connect with consumers. We look at momentum. Are you growing? Are you not? There's a lot of really fascinating things that come out of that when we look at the progress of different properties across the spectrum. And then when it comes to emotion, we looked at both sides, right? We saw that there's a very significant difference between passion for a property and excitement for a property. And those things, excitement changes really quick. Passion takes time, right? You got to sustain that excitement level if you're going to drive a passionate base and continue to build against that. And then the impact metric at the end of the day was like, what does it all mean for a brand who's spending, or who's being asked to spend, millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in sponsorship? I mean, we got to have a way to get down from, this approach that I think it's been changing quite drastically over the last several years. But it used to be, well, your total reach is going to be hundreds of millions of people, and we're going to give you, billion impressions across every channel. And that's great. But really, at the end of the day, how many people are we talking about impacting through this particular property or this sponsorship? And we have a reputable, credible way that, a property or a brand can say, okay, I understand the total size of the opportunity, but for my category or for my specific brand or for my specific demographic, like how many people at the end of the day are we talking about impacting? And that's a far more rational and important conversation, which also steers, a lot of the other outputs of that decision, which is how do we activate? How do we execute? How are we going to prove the return on our investment? So I think that's a bit of kind of the logic and what it took to get down to 7 metrics, which we don't think is overkill. We don't think it's too many, but we know that people are strapped for time. So we wanted to simplify, create that funnel so that people could look at properties in one consistent way across the globe, and obviously really get down to the nuts and bolts of, who are we talking about impacting at the end of the day.
And the 7 metrics are, can you just mention them really quickly?
Yeah. So top of the funnel, engagement, total reach. Below that, intensity is among those who are engaged, who is engaging with the property weekly or more. It's a great proxy for fandom. Momentum is people who are engaging with you currently, who believe that expect their interest in you to grow over the next 12 months. So it's a great predictor of where a property is going. Passion, excitement, and then potential impact on purchase consideration, and then potential impact on favorability. For brands that are sponsoring properties.
Awesome, man. You mentioned so many awesome takeaways. The one that I really want to repeat and distill for everyone listening is specifically for startups that are starting or that are building a product or a service that aims to solve a need or a problem in the future. I see in you guys a very important element of it, that it's change. It's basically to change and adapt and follow the trends and follow what's going on, in the markets, in the industries, in sports, in everything that's going on, as you mentioned, crypto and other like areas, cannabis and stuff. Being there and staying up to date, that is probably the number one indicator of a startup or a company that means that it will eventually prevail and survive. Because I feel like with no change, if you just would have created just one, simple questionnaire and would have used the same one every single time, you probably would have gotten, similar results over and over again. And even though the world is changing, you are not changing, so you're staying behind. So I just wanted to, go over again, review that idea again, as you mentioned, Adam, which I think is super interesting and valuable for startups and companies that are starting. But before we finish, I just want to cover real quick the latest report you guys released a few weeks ago, the top 50 most marketable sports properties report. What are some of the results that surprised you from this year's report, or this one compared to the last one, the previous? Is there any one or two things that you were like, oh, that's interesting?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that we can dig into in terms of like the nuances of the list. I think the first thing that kind of hit us in the face was the top 5 properties from last year are the exact same this year, and so I think that speaks volumes to the role that these properties have cemented in the global sports space, and that would be number one was FIFA. Then you've got the Olympic Games, then you've got NBA, then you've got Real Madrid, then you've got Barcelona. I think that it shows just the power of those properties on a global scale, which is just like fascinating. I think the other underlying themes, if you will, 22 of the top 50 were football leagues, teams, tournaments. So there's no question. When I say football, I know I'm from Canada. Soccer is what I mean. But there's no question it is the global game. However, there are a lot of properties that are popping up in other sports that I think are going to start. They're already starting to challenge, a lot of the top properties. So whether it be table tennis, whether it be badminton, whether it be volleyball, there's a lot of different properties that are popping up that are making some important gains, I think, year over year. UFC and the Indian Premier League posted the largest gains versus last year, moving more than 12 spots respectively in the list, which is amazing to see. I think it shows obviously how some of, from the cricket perspective, how they're growing into a really global, truly global brand or global sport. And UFC,
Is that the big is that the biggest riser, the most the one that changed spots the most? Is that
exactly?
I feel like I've heard more of it lately, so I would guess that's the biggest riser.
That is it. Yeah. So IPL and UFC both were pretty much neck and neck in terms of rising versus last year. And I think UFC's like, I mean, they've done an exceptional job building, personalities, which is largely due to obviously the personalities and the athletes that are in the ring. But I think they've done an amazing job at globalizing their sport and obviously delivering something that's entertaining, but that also, just profiles just an incredible athleticism. Whether you like or appreciate the UFC or not, you kind of have to stare at it in awe, or at least look away in awe at what they've done. And then one of the last things I'd say, not last thing, there's a couple things. One other thing. Women's sports, no question. The fact that there's 5 of them in the top 75, because we do have the top 100 list available for download online. It's just like, it's amazing to me. It's about damn time that they get the respect that they deserve and the exposure that they deserve. We know, and we have the data, women's sports is something that everybody wants. Males are actually the biggest consumers of women's sport. So I think it's something that we're going to continue to see these properties rise. And then the last kind of thing that popped up, there were 6 motorsport, properties and racing teams among them that were on or within the top 50. So a number of them new, based off of new tracking that we have for some of the racing teams specifically, but Ferrari was just outside the top 10, which is pretty fascinating when you think of who they're up against. So I think some really interesting things to dig into that we encourage people to challenge.
Man, I'm curious, which properties are the biggest losers?
Tennis.
Tennis.
All 4 Grand Slams.
Seriously.
So
okay.
yeah, so tennis all dropped pretty significantly versus last year. So they're the ones that dropped the most. I mean, there's a lot of different ways that we can diagnose that and get into like specifically what country was it that drove the decrease. But yeah, no, they hurt the most on this year's list. The Chicago Bulls dropped significantly. I mean, as an American team to be relevant globally, I think is still a massive achievement. But they had the next Netflix documentary last year and less news this year. But I think it's really important. We keep seeing the cross section of sport with music, with entertainment, with cause, and brands. Being a part of that journey is where we're seeing a ton of progress and I think success, because people are looking for that content in different formats and different storylines, different narratives than just the live sport itself. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. I saw that Jason Sudeikis of Ted Lasso, I think, is doing something in partnership with Real Madrid. So I'm like, there's some really cool innovation happening in the space that's, bringing people from entertainment and sport and music and whatever it may be kind of all together, which I think consumers are responding really well to.
Interesting. Is there anything that you learned, or one specific fact about fans, or about the behavioral element of the people really following those properties or being engaged by those properties? Is there anything specific that you saw that popped the eye?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. One of the things that I find the most fascinating is that, like, on average, from our global studies, we know that the average individual will consume north of 19 different properties in a year. So I think we often talk about, a soccer fan or a football fan or a hockey fan or whatever it may be. There is so much content out there. There are so many different ways for people to engage with different properties, whether they're in sport or beyond sport. And so I think the thought or the general premise that, you're dedicated to only one sport and that's all that you're going to be interested in is just flawed. And I think as a result, a lot of brands are looking for ways to diversify their portfolios and look at properties outside of sport to, get another hit and to be able to connect with people in other ways. But definitely something that I think is just important to remind ourselves, like, we're all people at the end of the day, right? Whenever there's something entertaining that we can spend some time and engage with and feel like we've gotten something out of, we're going to take those opportunities. So I think it's it's an interesting thing to continue to track and to remind ourselves of.
Man, this has been so interesting. I think we're gonna need another halftime snack to go over more of the questions, but at the same time, it's super interesting, man. But before I let you go, before we wrap this up, I just want to ask you a last one and more personal question, man. What's the book you've recommended the most?
That's a really a really good one. Depends on the day, to be honest. So what I've read latest, but Free was a book. I think it's from like 2009. But I think it's a really interesting read around the premise of freemium business models. It talks about Gmail versus Yahoo and how they went about their little battle. It also is funny to reread from that long ago because some of the conclusions that they drew certainly aren't true today. But I think there's a really interesting thing going on in the world around like information and access to information, to data. Obviously, we're at one particular cross section of that, and I think that there's a really interesting dynamic between information being available freely to people. And then, the scarcity of certain information being something that is obviously of great value. And I think for us, it's something that we continue to revisit and think about and talk about as a team because, we've tried to build a model. I think we've successfully built a model that makes data and the insights that you need to make good, sound business decisions. We've made it accessible at the price point that we make it available at. But we're continuously looking for ways to obviously improve accessibility to data, because we believe at the end of the day, if people have the right information at their fingertips, it's transparent, it's open to all parties, people will make better decisions, which is going to lead to better value at the end of the day for brands, properties, and more importantly, for people who are consuming brands and properties.
Man, it's fascinating to hear you speak. As I told you in the beginning, you speak like a consultant and speak so much clarity. And you
is that a good?
Yeah,
thing
yeah. You speak with so much clarity, and your thoughts are so organized, man. And I'm amazed by that, man. I can't thank you enough for coming to the halftime snacks. It has been, man, such a wonderful time. I barely even realized that we're well over the limit, but I didn't care because it was so fun, man. I appreciate you coming and sharing with us everything from insights and your story and your experience, and thank you so much, man, for coming. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. If you enjoy learning about the business and technology behind sports, make sure you subscribe to the Sports Tech Biz newsletter. I'll leave the link in the show notes. See you all next week. Bye-bye.